Jason believed he had everything: success, love, and a promising future, but one choice would shatter his world in ways he could never imagine. What happened to him will leave you stunned. Stay with us to uncover the shocking truth. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more incredible stories, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. The modest one-bedroom apartment on Chicago's South Side was a place where aspirations often faded, but for Christina Harris and her son Jason, it was their haven, a shelter from the harsh realities of the neighborhood. The peeling wallpaper, the relentless drip from the kitchen sink, and the chilly draft sneaking through the windows during winter were constant reminders of their struggles. Yet, within those four walls, Christina worked tirelessly to shield her son from the full burden of their poverty. Jason was only 2 years old when his father Mark Harris walked out of their lives. Christina had begged him to stay, not for her own sake but for Jason, who was too little to understand the loss. Mark simply shrugged, packed his bag, and disappeared into the night, leaving her to raise their son alone. That decision defined her path. From that moment, she vowed to be both mother and father to Jason, no matter the sacrifice. 6 weeks later, Jason was born, and 5 weeks later he vowed to return to the family. Each morning, Christina woke before sunrise to prepare for her job as a cashier at a local grocery store. By the time Jason opened his eyes, breakfast was already on the table, usually a simple plate of scrambled eggs and toast. Despite her weariness, she always made time to sit with him, weaving stories about hope and resilience. "Jason," she'd say, her tone firm but tender, "and that's all we need to succeed." Jason absorbed her words deeply, even at a young age, understanding the lengths to which his mother went to give him a better life. He often wondered why his father had left, and if it had been their fault. But Christina never spoke ill of Mark. Instead, she focused on teaching Jason the importance of hard work, kindness, and perseverance. As Jason grew older, he became more aware of their financial struggles. While his classmates wore brand new sneakers and carried the latest gadgets, he wore secondhand clothes and lugged a worn-out backpack. But rather than feeling ashamed, he carried their circumstances as a badge of pride, determined to honor his mother's sacrifices. When Jason was about 8 years old, he came home from school one day with tears streaming down his face. Christina, scrubbing the kitchen counters, heard the door slam and turned to see him sobbing. Her heart sank as she knelt to his level. "What's wrong, baby?" she asked gently. "They called me poor," Jason cried, clutching his tattered backpack. "They said I'll never be anything because I don't have what they have." Christina's heart ached, but she held back her pain. Cupping Jason's face in her hands, she made him look at her. "Listen to me, Jason," she said firmly. "You are not defined by what you own. You are defined by who you are. And you, my son, are smart, strong, and capable of achieving anything you set your mind to. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Jason nodded, wiping his tears. From that moment, his mother's words became his armor against the world's harshness. Through elementary and middle school, he excelled academically. Teachers often praised his intelligence and resilience, marveling at his maturity. One teacher in particular, Mr. Daniel Freeman, took Jason under his wing, becoming a mentor. Jason, National Congress top golf championship 4-star aspiring player port players, Mr. Freeman told him once, "You have a gift, don't waste it. With your mind and determination you can achieve things most people can only dream of." Those words ignited a spark in Jason. He began envisioning a life beyond the limits of his neighborhood, a life where he could provide his mother with all she had sacrificed for him. But the road wasn't easy. As years passed, Christina's health started to decline, worn down by the relentless demands of multiple jobs. She developed chronic back pain and would often come home barely able to stand. Now a teenager, Jason stepped up, taking on part-time jobs to help ease the burden, balancing school, work, and sports with an unwavering sense of purpose. By the time Jason entered high school, he had become both an academic and athletic standout. He excelled in football, earning the role of team captain, while his grades consistently placed him among the top students in his class. Christina's words of wisdom continued to guide him. "You're doing great, Jason," she told him one evening as they sat together at their small kitchen table. "But never forget where you come from. Always remember to stay kind and humble." "I won't, Mom," Jason said with a smile. "I promise." Their bond was unbreakable, strengthened through years of shared challenges and unyielding love. Jason often marveled at his mother's resilience. To him, she was a hero, a guiding light in a world that sometimes felt harsh and unforgiving. As high school graduation neared, a letter arrived that would change everything. Jason had earned a full scholarship to the University of Illinois, a dream he had dared to hold on to but never truly expected to achieve. When he shared the news with Christina, she broke into tears, wrapping him in a tight embrace. "You did it, Jason," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're going to do incredible things." Jason's departure for college was bittersweet. Christina brimmed with pride, but the thought of being separated from her son left her feeling hollow. On the day he left, she stood in the doorway, waving as he drove off toward a new chapter in his life. As his car disappeared down the street, she whispered a quiet prayer for his safety and success. Neither could have predicted the challenges that lay ahead, challenges that would test the strength of their bond in unimaginable ways. Arriving at the University of Illinois felt like stepping into an entirely new world. The sprawling campus was alive with energy, its students representing a kaleidoscope of backgrounds and aspirations. For Jason, it was both exhilarating and intimidating, a stark contrast to the life he had always known. Carrying the weight of his mother's sacrifices on his shoulders, Jason was determined not to fail her. He quickly immersed himself in his studies, choosing computer science, a field that had always fascinated him. His natural talent for problem-solving and coding soon caught the attention of his professors, and classmates frequently sought his help with assignments. Even so, Jason couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. The scars of growing up in poverty lingered, and he often compared himself to peers who seemed to glide through life without a care. But instead of succumbing to insecurity, he used it as fuel. Every late night spent coding, every marathon study session, and every group project felt like a step toward fulfilling the future he and Christina had envisioned. Outside of class, Jason kept to himself. He couldn't afford to join the social scene that many of his peers enjoyed. While others partied on weekends, he was in his dorm, poring over lines of code or reading about the latest advancements in technology. His dedication paid off during his sophomore year when he secured an internship at a prestigious software company. The experience was transformative, shaping the trajectory of his career. Jason worked tirelessly, earning the respect of his supervisors, and contributing to a project that later became one of the company's flagship products. By the end of the summer, his performance had impressed the company so much that they expressed interest in hiring him after graduation. While the offer filled Jason with pride, it also underscored the growing distance between him and Christina. Their phone calls had become less frequent, not because he cared any less, but because he was consumed by work and school. "How are you doing, Mom?" he'd ask whenever they spoke. "I'm fine, baby," Christina would reply, her voice warm and reassuring. "Just working and taking it one day at a time. You don't need to worry about me. Focus on your goals." Jason could sense the unspoken longing behind her words. She missed him deeply, and the physical distance between them only amplified the ache. By his final year of college, Jason had already started developing plans for his own tech startup. Encouraged by his professors and supported by a small group of like-minded classmates, he began building a vision for an innovative app that had the potential to disrupt the market. It was a bold step toward the future he had always dreamed of. Jason developed and launched his first app, a platform designed to connect freelancers with clients in niche industries. The app gained traction rapidly, earning praise from industry leaders and capturing the interest of potential investors. His rise to success was swift, and by the time he graduated with honors, his startup had already secured significant funding. This achievement allowed him to return to Chicago and establish an office in the city's bustling tech district. For Jason, it felt like the culmination of a dream, a chance to give back to the city that shaped him, and most importantly, to create a better life for his mother. "Mom, I'm coming home," Jason announced during one of their calls. "I found an office downtown. It's small, but it's a start." Christina's excitement was clear. "That's amazing, Jason. I'm so proud of you." When Jason returned to Chicago, Christina welcomed him with open arms and a table laden with his favorite meal, fried chicken, collard greens, and cornbread, a heartfelt expression of her love and pride. They spent hours at the dining table, sharing stories of the past and imagining the possibilities of the future. "You've come so far, Jason," Christina said, her voice thick with emotion. "But remember, success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you are and how you treat others." "I know, Mom," Jason replied earnestly. Everything I do is because of you. I'll never forget that. Jason's return marked the start of a new chapter, but it came with its own set of challenges. Managing a startup was no easy task, and Jason found himself consumed by long hours, juggling the demands of investors, employees, and clients. Despite the mounting pressure, he remained deeply committed to his vision, pouring his heart into the company. As the startup flourished, Jason's reputation grew alongside it. He became a rising star in the tech industry, featured in prominent publications and invited to speak at conferences. For a young black man from the south side of Chicago, his success was groundbreaking, inspiring countless others facing similar struggles. But behind the accolades and opportunities, Jason began to feel the heavy burden of isolation. His relentless drive left little time for personal connections, and once again the distance between him and Christina started to grow. Christina noticed the shift, but chose not to voice her worries. She understood the demands of Jason's career and didn't want to weigh him down with her feelings. Quietly, she continued to cheer him on from a distance, proud of the man he had become. During this period, Jason met Natasha Brown, a customer support specialist at one of his partner companies. Natasha was everything Jason thought he was looking for: intelligent, ambitious, and charismatic. She shared his drive for success, and their connection was instant. After years of focusing solely on work, Jason found himself captivated by Natasha's energy and charm. Their relationship blossomed quickly, with Natasha showing a particular interest in Jason's business. She frequently offered ideas for expansion and strategies, positioning herself as a valuable ally in both his personal and professional life. Jason appreciated her insights, seeing her as a partner who understood his ambitions. Not everyone, however, was convinced of Natasha's intentions. When Jason introduced her to Christina during a family dinner, Christina couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling that arose. Natasha was polite but distant, her smile never quite reaching her eyes when she spoke to Christina. Later that evening, Christina gently expressed her concerns to Jason. "She seems calculated," she said cautiously. "I'm not saying she's a bad person, but just be careful, Jason. Not everyone who smiles at you has your best interests at heart." Jason dismissed her worries, attributing them to overprotectiveness. "Mom, Natasha isn't like that. She believes in me, just like you do. You'll see." But Christina couldn't shake her suspicion that Natasha's interest in Jason was rooted more in his success than in who he was as a person. As Jason grew closer to Natasha, the bond he shared with his mother began to show signs of strain. Jason's journey to success was marked by triumphs and trials, a path paved with incredible achievements, but also personal and emotional sacrifices. The bustling streets of downtown Chicago reflected his life, fast-paced, demanding, and full of distractions. In the midst of this whirlwind, Natasha became an increasingly significant presence in his world, though her role would soon bring unforeseen complications. Jason had been attending a networking event at an upscale conference center, mingling with tech entrepreneurs, investors, and executives. Natasha, a poised and confident woman with an air of sophistication, was introduced to him by a mutual acquaintance. From the moment they met, Jason was captivated. Natasha radiated charm and intelligence, asking incisive questions about his startup that demonstrated she wasn't there to make small talk. She had a sharp mind and an even sharper wit, effortlessly navigating complex discussions. "Your app has incredible potential," Natasha remarked, her tone smooth and confident. "But have you considered expanding into subscription-based services? That could create consistent revenue streams and attract more investors." Jason was impressed. Most people he encountered at such events either asked surface-level questions or focused on themselves. Natasha, however, was different. Her insights aligned closely with his vision, and their initial conversation stretched well into the evening. By the time Jason left, her number was saved in his phone. In the weeks that followed, Jason and Natasha began meeting regularly. At first it was casual coffee at trendy cafes or quick lunches squeezed between Jason's packed schedule. But as they spent more time together, their connection deepened. Natasha wasn't just interested in his business. She seemed to grasp the unique pressures Jason faced as a young black entrepreneur navigating a predominantly white industry. "You have to work twice as hard to be seen as half as good," she told him one evening over dinner at a quiet restaurant. "I understand that. People underestimate you before you even say a word." Her words struck a chord. Jason had felt the sting of being overlooked or undervalued for much of his life. Natasha's understanding and empathy made him feel seen in a way that few others had managed. Gradually, Jason began lowering his guard, sharing parts of his life that he usually kept private. As their relationship grew, Jason decided it was time for Natasha to meet Christina. He arranged a dinner at his mother's cozy apartment, a space Christina had lovingly maintained despite its modest condition. She had prepared a home-cooked meal with care, eager to welcome the woman her son had grown so fond of. But the evening didn't unfold as Jason had hoped. Natasha's polished demeanor seemed out of place in the warmth of Christina's humble home. Though polite, her tone carried a faint hint of condescension that Christina couldn't ignore. Natasha appeared uncomfortable when the conversation turned to Jason's struggles growing up, shifting uneasily in her chair as if the topic was beneath her. Christina noticed how Natasha's eyes lingered on the peeling paint of the walls or the worn edges of the dining table, her smile too rehearsed to feel genuine. After Natasha left, Christina shared her concerns. "Jason, I'm glad you found someone, but something about her feels off. She's too polished, too focused on appearances." Jason frowned. "Mom, you're overthinking this. Natasha supports me and believes in what I'm building. Just because she's different from what you're used to doesn't mean there's something wrong with her." "I'm not saying she's bad," Christina replied gently. "I'm just saying to be careful. Not everyone who comes into your life has the right intentions." Jason dismissed her worries, attributing them to a generational gap. He deeply respected his mother's judgment, but in this instance, he felt she was being overly critical. Natasha had been nothing but supportive, often brainstorming ideas with him late into the night, or attending investor meetings as his unofficial partner. But as their relationship progressed, subtle warning signs began to emerge. Natasha's interest in Jason's company seemed to overshadow her interest in him. She frequently steered conversations toward business, expansion plans, revenue strategies, and securing larger investors, sometimes at the expense of personal topics. When Jason tried to talk about his upbringing or the challenges his mother had faced, Natasha would quickly redirect the discussion back to professional matters. Jason, blinded by affection, brushed aside these red flags. He saw Natasha's ambition as a complement to his own, believing they were the perfect team, a power couple destined for greatness. Yet beneath her polished exterior, Natasha's motivations were far from pure. She was drawn not just to Jason but to the success and opportunities his burgeoning empire could offer her. Unbeknownst to Jason, the partnership he cherished so deeply was quietly becoming something much darker. Natasha admired Jason's intelligence and ambition, but her true focus was on his flourishing company. To her, his success was a gateway to the wealth and influence she craved, and she was determined to secure her place at the top, even if it meant manipulating the man who trusted her implicitly. Their relationship encountered its first major challenge when Natasha proposed a joint business venture. She had been researching the market for a new app and pitched the idea to Jason with palpable enthusiasm. The concept appeared promising but required a substantial financial investment, most of which would have to come from Jason's company. "I believe in this idea," Natasha said, her voice persuasive, "and I believe in us. This could be our opportunity to build something truly groundbreaking together." Jason hesitated. He trusted Natasha, but the thought of risking his company's resources made him uneasy. Seeking clarity, he called Christina to share his dilemma. "Mom, Natasha wants to start a business with me," he explained. "She has a great idea, but I'm not sure if it's the right move." Christina's response was firm. "Jason, don't mix business with personal relationships. It rarely ends well. If this idea is as good as she says, she should be willing to find her own investors." Jason sighed. "So you're saying I shouldn't trust her?" Hilal asked. "I'm saying you need to protect what you've built," Christina replied. "You've worked too hard to let someone else jeopardize it." Taking his mother's advice to heart, Jason decided to delay his decision, hoping to gain more time to evaluate the situation. Natasha, however, didn't take the news well. She accused Jason of not trusting her and questioned his commitment to their relationship. The argument left Jason feeling torn between his loyalty to his mother and his desire to make Natasha happy. As the weeks passed, the tension between Jason and Natasha only grew. She became increasingly insistent about the joint venture, while Jason grew more cautious. The strong connection they once shared began to unravel, and Jason found himself wondering if their relationship was based on genuine love or mutual ambition. Christina watched from a distance, her heart weighed down with worry. She wanted to protect her son, but knew he had to learn some lessons for himself. All she could do was hope that Jason would see Natasha's true nature before it was too late. Jason sat in his sleek, modern office, overlooking the Chicago skyline as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city he once dreamed of escaping. Yet the view failed to bring the satisfaction he thought it would. His mind was tangled in the complexities of his relationship with Natasha and the widening rift with his mother. Christina's warnings about Natasha echoed in his head, but Jason dismissed them as overprotectiveness. Natasha was ambitious and driven, qualities he admired. She had supported him through some of the most challenging moments in his business, offering ideas and encouragement. Surely his mother's concerns were misplaced. And yet, a nagging doubt lingered, refusing to be silenced. That evening, Jason invited Natasha to his apartment. The space was spacious and minimalist, a stark contrast to the modest home where he had grown up. Natasha entered, as impeccably dressed as ever, exuding the confident air Jason found both magnetic and intimidating. "Long day?" she asked casually, pouring herself a glass of wine without waiting for an answer. "Yeah," Jason replied, loosening his tie. "I've been thinking about your business proposal." Her eyes lit up. "And I'm still not sure," he admitted. "It's a big risk. I need more time to evaluate everything." Natasha's expression darkened as she set the glass down with more force than necessary. "Jason, we've been over this. It's a solid idea and you know it. What's really holding you back?" Jason hesitated, searching for the words to express an unease he couldn't quite articulate. "It's just, I've worked so hard to build this company, Natasha. I can't afford to make a mistake." "You saying I'm a mistake?" she snapped, crossing her arms, "because that's what it feels like." "Of course not," Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just need to be cautious. This isn't about you, it's about making sure the company stays on track." Natasha softened slightly, though frustration still flickered in her eyes. "Jason, I believe in you, I believe in us, but if you can't trust me enough to take this step, then maybe we need to reevaluate what we're doing here." Her words struck Jason like a blow. He had fought tooth and nail to get to where he was, defying every obstacle life had thrown at him. Yet here he was, caught between the woman he thought he loved and the mother who had always been his unwavering support. A few days later, Jason decided to bring Natasha to another family dinner, hoping to mend the growing rift between the two most important women in his life. Christina had reluctantly agreed, her unease about Natasha still unresolved. The dinner began awkwardly, with Christina making a concerted effort to engage Natasha in polite conversation. Natasha, however, appeared disinterested, her responses curt, and her attention frequently wandering. Jason noticed his mother's forced smile and the tension in her posture, but he chose to overlook it, determined to maintain a light-hearted atmosphere. "Mom, Natasha has been working on some amazing ideas for the company," Jason said, trying to spark a connection. "That's wonderful," Christina replied, her tone warm but guarded. "I'm sure you've thought everything through." Natasha offered a tight-lipped smile. "I have. It's all about taking calculated risks. Wouldn't you agree?" "True," Christina said, meeting Natasha's gaze steadily, "but sometimes it's better to trust your instincts than a calculated risk." The subtle jab wasn't lost on Natasha, whose posture stiffened in response. Jason felt the tension rising and quickly changed the subject, but the damage had already been done. By the end of the evening, it was clear that the dinner had only widened the gap between the two women. After Natasha left, Jason lingered behind to help his mother clean up. The silence between them was heavy, thick with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Christina broke it. "Jason, I know you love her, but I can't shake the feeling that she's not what she seems," she said softly. Jason froze, his grip tightening on the edge of the countertop. "Mom, you don't know her like I do." "I know enough," Christina said gently. "I've seen the way she looks, not at you but at your success. I just don't want you to get hurt." Jason turned to face her, his expression a mixture of frustration and hurt. "Mom, I appreciate your concern, but I need you to trust me. I'm not a kid anymore. I can handle my own life." "I'm not saying you can't," Christina replied, her voice trembling. "I just want you to be careful." The argument escalated quickly, emotions boiling over. Jason accused Christina of being overbearing and unwilling to accept his choices, while Christina argued that Jason was blinded by his feelings for Natasha. By the time Jason left, both were left shaken, their once unbreakable bond beginning to fracture. In the weeks that followed, Jason buried himself in his work, avoiding his mother's calls. Sensing the tension, Natasha used the opportunity to draw him closer, framing herself as his sole confidant. She convinced Jason to move forward with her business proposal, presenting it as a step toward their future together. "Sometimes you have to take risks to grow," she told him one evening in his apartment. "This is our chance to build something incredible. Don't let fear hold you back." Jason nodded, though a nagging unease lingered. The next day, he signed the paperwork, merging part of his company's resources with Natasha's venture. It was a turning point, one that would have consequences far greater than Jason could imagine. Meanwhile, Christina watched from a distance, her worry deepening. She had always trusted Jason's judgment, but Natasha's growing influence left her unsettled. She prayed that her son would realize the truth before it was too late, though part of her feared the worst. The rift between mother and son widened, and with it the foundation of Jason's carefully constructed world began to crack. What once seemed like a bright and limitless future was now overshadowed by doubt, deception, and the painful realization that love and trust are not always the same. The call came on a quiet Sunday morning, breaking the stillness of Christina's small apartment. She had been sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, and flipping through an old photo album filled with memories of Jason's childhood. The shrill ring of her phone startled her, and she reached for it instinctively, her heart skipping a beat when she saw an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" she answered, her voice cautious. "Mrs. Harris, this is Detective Williams with the Chicago Police Department," a man said on the other end, his tone formal but tinged with unease. "I'm calling to inform you that your son Jason Harris has passed away." Christina froze, her breath catching in her throat. That can't be true," she stammered. "There must be some mistake." "I'm very sorry, ma'am," Detective Williams replied gently. "We were notified by his wife Natasha. She reported that he passed in his sleep last night. The coroner is conducting an examination, but it appears to be natural causes." The words struck Christina like a freight train, knocking the air from her lungs. Her mind raced, struggling to grasp the unimaginable. Jason. Her Jason. The vibrant, ambitious young man she had raised with love and sacrifice was gone. Just gone. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as tears streamed down her face. "This can't be happening." The rest of the conversation was a blur. Detective Williams mentioned funeral arrangements that Natasha had already begun planning, but Christina barely processed his words. When the call ended, she sat motionless, clutching the phone as though it were the last connection to her son. Hours passed in a haze as Christina replayed the detective's words over and over in her mind. Questions swirled. Why hadn't Natasha called her directly? Why were arrangements being made so quickly? And most of all, how could her healthy, vibrant son have died so suddenly? Grief soon gave way to suspicion. Something felt off. Her instincts screamed that there was more to Jason's death than what she had been told. Resolving to uncover the truth, Christina decided to attend the funeral, despite not having received an invitation from Natasha. The day of the funeral arrived far too quickly. Christina, dressed in a simple black dress, her hands trembling as she pinned a brooch to her chest. The ride to the funeral home was silent, broken only by her occasional sniffles as she wiped away tears. When she arrived, the sight of Jason's closed casket at the front of the room sent a fresh wave of anguish crashing over her. The service was packed with people, most of whom Christina didn't recognize. Business associates, colleagues, and friends of Natasha filled the seats, exchanging muted condolences. Christina's eyes found Natasha at the front. She stood among a group of friends, her expression composed but disturbingly indifferent. She spoke in hushed tones that seemed far too casual for the somber occasion. As the service began, Christina's grief was overtaken by a simmering anger. The eulogies, though well-meaning, focused entirely on Jason's professional achievements, glossing over the person he was beyond his success. There was no mention of the little boy who adored football, the teenager who worked tirelessly to help his mother, or the young man who had overcome impossible odds. When the service drew to a close, the funeral director announced that the casket would be transported to the burial site. Overwhelmed with emotion, Christina stood, her resolve firm. She needed to see Jason one last time, to say goodbye properly. "I'd like to open the casket," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Natasha's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "That won't be necessary," she said coldly. "The arrangements have already been made." Christina stared at her, her grief morphing into suspicion. "I'm his mother," she said, her voice growing steadier. "I have the right to see him." Natasha stepped forward, blocking her path. "I said no," she snapped, her tone sharp and unyielding. "Jason wouldn't want this." The tension in the room was suffocating, murmurs spreading among the attendees. Christina's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wouldn't be dismissed, not when every fiber of her being screamed that something was wrong. Ignoring Natasha's protests, Christina pushed past her and approached the casket. A few people tried to intervene, but her determination was unshakable. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid. Gasps rippled through the room as Christina's suspicions were confirmed. Jason's chest rose and fell, faintly but unmistakably. He was breathing. He was alive. "Me son is alive," Christina cried, her voice piercing through the stunned silence. "Someone call an ambulance." Chaos erupted as people scrambled to comprehend what they were seeing. Natasha froze, her carefully constructed composure shattering as she realized her plan had been exposed. Before she could flee, one of Jason's friends, an off-duty police officer, stepped forward and restrained her. "What did you do to him?" Christina demanded, her voice shaking with fury as she stood over Natasha. "What did you do to my son?" Natasha's composure disintegrated and she began to sob uncontrollably. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted to make it look like he was gone." Her confession sent a chill through the room. Under questioning, Natasha admitted to giving Jason a heavy dose of sedatives with the intention of faking his death to seize control of his assets. She had underestimated how quickly the sedatives would wear off, and her carefully laid plan unraveled before her eyes. Paramedics arrived and rushed Jason to the hospital, where he was stabilized and kept under close monitoring. When he finally regained consciousness, the first thing he saw was his mother sitting at his bedside, her tear-streaked face a mixture of profound relief and quiet anger. "Mom," he croaked, his voice weak but steady. "What happened?" Christina took his hand in hers, her grip firm but tender. "You almost lost everything, Jason," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But you're here. You're alive. That's all that matters now." As Jason listened, the full weight of the situation hit him. He had ignored his mother's warnings, blinded by his love for Natasha and his ambition. Now, faced with the reality of her betrayal and his narrow escape, he silently vowed never to take his mother's wisdom for granted again. Meanwhile, Natasha faced the consequences of her actions. Arrested on charges of attempted murder and fraud, she was stripped of any claim to Jason's company and sentenced to prison. Her ambitions, built on manipulation and deceit, had ultimately led to her downfall. For Christina and Jason, the ordeal was a harsh but necessary lesson in the importance of trust and family. Their bond, though tested, emerged stronger than ever as they began the long journey of healing together. The hospital room was quiet, the only sound the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Jason lay pale and weak but alive. Christina sat at his side, holding his hand tightly, her eyes never leaving his face. The weight of the ordeal pressed down on her, but the overwhelming relief of having her son alive gave her the strength to carry on. Jason stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. His gaze met Christina's, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Tears welled up in his eyes as he weakly tightened his grip on her hand. "Mom," he rasped, his voice faint. "What happened?" Christina leaned forward, brushing his forehead gently with her hand. "You're safe now," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But Jason, you've been through so much. Natasha, she did this to you." Jason's brows knitted in confusion. "Natasha? What do you mean?" Taking a deep breath, Christina began recounting the events of the funeral. The insistence on opening the casket, discovering that he was still alive, and how Natasha's twisted plan had unraveled before everyone. Jason listened in stunned silence, his expression shifting from disbelief to anger as the truth sank in. "She drugged me?" he asked, his voice rising despite his weakened state. Christina nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. She wanted to take everything, Jason. Your company, your assets, everything you've worked so hard for. She would have buried you alive if I hadn't stopped her." Jason's fists clenched, the betrayal cutting deeper than any physical wound. He had trusted Natasha, let her into his life, and ignored every warning his mother had given him. The realization was almost unbearable. "I was such a fool," he said, his voice trembling. "I should have listened to you." Christina squeezed his hand, her grip steady and reassuring. "You're not a fool, Jason. You wanted to see the good in her. That's not a weakness. But you have to remember who's really in your corner." Jason's jaw tightened as he absorbed her words. His mind replayed every moment with Natasha, every decision to involve her in his business and his life. The signs had been there all along, but he had ignored them, blinded by love and ambition. Their quiet reflection was interrupted by a knock at the door. Detective Williams entered, his expression somber but determined. A folder was tucked under his arm as he gave Christina a polite nod before turning to Jason. "Mr. Harris, I'm glad to see you awake," the detective said. "I wanted to update you on the investigation." Jason struggled to sit up, wincing at the effort. Christina immediately adjusted his pillows, her protective instincts kicking in. "What's going to happen to Natasha?" Jason asked, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. Detective Williams pulled up a chair, placing a folder on the small table beside Jason's hospital bed. "Natasha Brown has been taken into custody," he began. "She's facing charges of attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. During her initial interrogation, she admitted her plan in full detail." Christina's hands clenched tightly, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. "She admitted it?" she asked sharply. "She actually confessed to what she did?" The detective nodded. "Yes, ma'am. She confessed to drugging Mr. Harris with a high dose of sedatives, intending to stage his death and take control of his assets. She underestimated how long the drugs would keep him unconscious, and her plan fell apart when you intervened." Jason's stomach churned as the detective continued to outline the details of Natasha's cold and calculated betrayal. The woman he had loved and trusted had seen him as nothing more than a means to an end, a stepping stone to wealth and power. "What happens next?" Jason asked, his voice low but steady. "The evidence against her is overwhelming," Detective Williams replied. "In addition to her confession, we have secured financial records showing her attempts to transfer your assets into accounts under her control. With your testimony, we can ensure she's held accountable." Jason nodded, his resolve solidifying. "I'll testify," he said firmly. "I want her to face the consequences of what she did." Christina placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We'll get through this, Jason. Together." After the detective left, the hospital room fell silent. Christina and Jason sat quietly, the weight of the ordeal heavy in the air. For Christina, the experience was a sobering reminder of how fragile life could be. For Jason, it was a painful lesson in trust and the importance of heeding the wisdom of those who truly cared for him. In the days that followed, Jason's recovery was slow but steady. Christina remained by his side, her presence a constant source of comfort and strength. They spent hours talking, reminiscing about Jason's childhood and reflecting on the choices that had led them to this moment. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Jason said one evening, his voice laden with regret. "I should have listened to you. I should have seen her for who she really was." Christina shook her head, her expression softening. "We all make mistakes, Jason. What matters is what you do next. You've been given a second chance, and I know you'll make the most of it." Jason nodded, a flicker of determination lighting his eyes. "I will, and I'll make it up to you, Mom. I promise." As the days turned into weeks, Jason regained his strength. His company, left in limbo during his absence, welcomed him back with open arms. With Christina's guidance, he worked to rebuild trust with his team and refocus the company's priorities on integrity and purpose. Natasha's trial became a high-profile case, drawing significant media attention. Jason testified in court, recounting the betrayal and near-fatal consequences of her actions. Christina sat in the courtroom each day, her presence a silent testament to the love and strength that had saved Jason's life. When the verdict was delivered, guilty on all charges, Jason felt a sense of closure. Natasha was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with no chance of parole for at least 15. The weight of her betrayal still lingered in his heart, but the knowledge that she would face justice brought a measure of peace. For Christina and Jason, the journey of healing was far from over. The scars left by the ordeal ran deep, but their bond, forged through hardship and unwavering love, remained unbreakable. As they exited the courthouse together, the steps were crowded with reporters and onlookers. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust in their direction, and shouted questions created a deafening cacophony. Jason kept his head high, his hand steady on Christina's arm, as they navigated the chaos. This moment wasn't about the spectacle, it was about the closure they both desperately needed. Natasha's sentence had brought justice, but the true victory lay in the strength they had found in each other. Jason turned to his mother, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Christina smiled, her eyes shimmering with tears. "You're my son, Jason. I'll always fight for you." Together, they stepped into the sunlight, ready to face whatever the future held, stronger, wiser, and united. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a harrowing chapter in their lives, one that tested their bond but ultimately made it stronger. As they approached the car waiting for them at the curb, Jason opened the door for his mother, a simple but heartfelt gesture that spoke volumes. Once inside, the noise of the outside world faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the engine. "Are you okay, Mom?" Jason asked, his voice tinged with concern as he glanced at her. Christina nodded, her lips curving into a soft smile. "I am now. What about you?" Jason sighed, leaning back against the seat. "I don't know. I'm relieved it's over, but there's so much to process. I let her into my life, into my company, and she nearly destroyed everything. I can't stop thinking about how close I came to losing it all." Christina placed a reassuring hand on his knee. "You made it through, Jason. That's what matters. And you've learned a lesson that will stay with you forever. You're stronger now. Wiser." Jason nodded, her words sinking in. He had indeed learned a painful but invaluable lesson about trust, love, and priorities. As the car moved through the bustling streets of Chicago, he found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment, the sacrifices his mother had made, the struggles they had endured together, and the resilience that carried them forward. In the weeks that followed, Jason focused on healing and rebuilding. This time, his work was driven by a renewed sense of purpose. He made changes to his company's structure, ensuring that no one person could ever wield unchecked influence again. He also prioritized the well-being of his team, recognizing that success wasn't just about profits, but about creating a positive and supportive environment. Christina, ever the steady presence in his life, visited his office often, bringing home-cooked meals, and her unshakable wisdom. Her pride in Jason was evident in every word, every gesture. In turn, Jason made a conscious effort to involve her more in his life. Weekends became their time, long walks by the lake, sharing stories, and simply enjoying each other's company. One evening as they sat on the balcony of Jason's apartment, the city lights twinkling against the night sky, Christina turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "You've been given a second chance, Jason," she said softly. "Not just with your life, but with how you choose to live it. What are you going to do with it?" Jason stared out at the cityscape, her words resonating deeply. "I've been thinking about that a lot," he admitted. "I want to do more, Mom, not just for myself but for others. I want to give back, to help people who are in the position we were once in." Christina's smile widened, her eyes glistening with pride. "That's my boy," she said softly, "always thinking of others." Motivated by this renewed purpose, Jason began laying the groundwork for a foundation dedicated to supporting underprivileged youth in Chicago. He wanted to create opportunities for kids like him, kids with dreams but without the means to achieve them. Christina became his biggest supporter, offering ideas and helping him connect with community leaders. The foundation's launch event was held in a renovated community center on the south side of Chicago, not far from where Jason had grown up. The turnout was overwhelming, with local families, business leaders, and even former teachers coming together to celebrate the initiative. As Jason took the stage to deliver his speech, he spotted Christina in the front row, her smile shining brighter than any spotlight. "Thank you all for being here," Jason began, his voice steady and confident. "This foundation is more than just a project. It's a promise to the kids in this city that no matter where you come from, you can achieve greatness. I'm living proof of that, and I owe it all to the incredible woman sitting right there, my mom." The audience erupted in applause as Christina wiped away tears, her heart swelling with pride. Jason continued sharing his journey and the lessons he had learned along the way. His words were a testament to resilience, hope, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. As the event came to a close, Jason and Christina stood together, surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. For the first time in a long while, Jason felt a deep sense of contentment and purpose that went beyond personal success. "Mom," he said, turning to Christina as the crowd began to disperse, "thank you for never giving up on me, for always believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Christina placed a hand on his cheek, her gaze filled with love. "Jason, you've always been my greatest pride. Watching you grow into the man you are today has been the greatest joy of my life." The evening ended with the two of them walking side by side, the city lights guiding their way. They had faced unimaginable challenges, but they had emerged stronger, their bond unshakable. Together, they were ready to embrace whatever the future held, confident that love, resilience, and family could overcome even the darkest trials. Thank you for watching this incredible story. If you found it as gripping as we did, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that will leave you inspired. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from? And what would you have done in Jason's place? See you in the next video.